My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 25 years old. I never thought my own family would turn on me like this, but during a tense family dinner in our suburban Chicago home, everything fell apart. My mom set down her glass, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "This house no longer belongs to you, it belongs to your brother." My brother smirked, his eyes glinting with smug satisfaction, like he'd just won some twisted game. My younger sister froze her fork suspended midair, her face pale with shock. The room went completely silent, every pair of eyes locked on me, waiting for me to explode or beg. But I didn't. I just smiled, a calm, deliberate smile that hid the storm brewing inside. I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked away without saying a single word. They thought they could erase me, but they had no idea what was coming. The next day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, call after call from my mom, her voice frantic, and messages from my brother demanding I fix whatever I'd done. They were panicking, unraveling, because my move hit them harder than they ever expected. Want to know how I turned their world upside down? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. My mother had always favored my older brother even when we were kids, growing up in our suburban Chicago home. It wasn't just the extra slice of cake at birthdays or the way she'd laugh off his screw-ups while nitpicking every move I made. It was deeper, like she'd decided he was the golden child destined for greatness, while I was just there to fill in the gaps. By 25, I was a freelance accountant pulling in steady money, and I'd been pouring most of it into the family to keep us afloat. The house we lived in, I co-owned it thanks to my grandfather's will. He'd left half to me, half to my mother, a safety net he thought would protect us. I paid the mortgage, covered repairs, and chipped in for groceries when my mother's part-time retail job fell short. My brother, he was 28, drifting from one dead-end gig to another, always with an excuse: bad boss, bad luck, bad timing. Yet my mother would beam at him like he was some prodigy waiting for his big break. I didn't mind the work at first. I figured it was my duty keeping the family together after my grandfather passed. But the imbalance gnawed at me. My mother would go on about my brother's potential, how he just needed time to figure things out. Meanwhile, she barely acknowledged the hours I spent balancing our budget or the fact that I'd given up my own apartment to stay home and help. If I ever brought it up, she'd wave it off saying, "You're doing fine, Sarah. You don't need the praise." It stung, but I swallowed it, thinking family was worth it. My younger sister was the only one who saw through the charade. At 17, she was sharp, quiet, observant, catching every sideways glance my mother threw my way. She'd sit with me late at night, going over my spreadsheets, asking questions about taxes or bills like she was trying to understand the weight I carried. One night, maybe a year ago, she looked at me across the kitchen table, her eyes wide with worry. "What happens if you stop?" she asked, her voice low, like she was afraid my mother would hear. I shrugged, not wanting to scare her, but the question stuck. I'd been the glue holding us together, but what if I let go? Would they even notice until it was too late? The favoritism wasn't just talk, it showed in the little things. My mother would buy my brother new clothes, claiming he needed them for job interviews while I was still wearing the same coat from 3 winters ago. She'd spend hours helping him tweak his resume, but when I landed a big client, she just nodded like it was expected. My sister noticed it too. She'd roll her eyes when my mother gushed over my brother's half-baked plans, like starting a podcast or flipping houses with no money. "He's all talk," my sister whispered to me once after my mother spent dinner praising his latest scheme. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was exhausting. The house was the breaking point. My grandfather's will was clear: I owned half, my mother the other. But my mother acted like it was hers alone, always talking about passing it down to my brother like I didn't exist. I'd overhear her on the phone with her friends bragging about how he'd take care of the family someday. Take care of what I was the one paying the mortgage, keeping the lights on, making sure the pipes didn't freeze in winter. My brother hadn't paid a dime yet. She was ready to hand him everything. I started to see the pattern. My mother wasn't just blind to his flaws. She was rewriting reality to make him the hero. My sister's worry grew over time. She'd catch me after dinner when my mother and brother were off planning his next big move and ask, "Are you okay with this?" Her voice was always soft, like she was testing the waters. I'd nod, say I was fine, but I wasn't. The unfairness was eating at me, building up like pressure in a dam. I'd lie awake at night, running numbers in my head, wondering how long I could keep propping up a family that didn't see me. My sister saw it, though. She'd text me from her room just across the hall, saying things like, "You deserve better." It was her way of saying she had my back, even if no one else did. By the time that dinner happened, I wasn't surprised by my mother's words, but they still cut deep. I'd spent years keeping the house running, sacrificing my own plans, only to hear her say it belonged to my brother. My sister's face that night, pale eyes darting between me and my mother, told me she knew what was coming. She wasn't just shocked. She was scared. Scared of what it meant for me, for her, for all of us. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the start of everything unraveling. I went to my room that night, my mind racing. I couldn't sleep that night, my thoughts spinning like a ledger I couldn't balance. By 25, I'd built a solid career as a freelance accountant, working long hours to manage small business clients across Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to keep my family's house running when my mother's part-time retail shifts barely covered her own expenses. I'd been at it for 3 years, ever since I graduated college with a degree in finance. Most of my income went straight to the family. The house we lived in, a modest 2-story in the suburbs, was half mine, thanks to my grandfather's will. He'd left it to me and my mother, equally a practical man who believed in securing his family's future. I took that responsibility seriously, paying the mortgage every month, covering property taxes, even fixing the leaky roof last spring. It wasn't just duty, it was my way of honoring him. My mother, on the other hand, saw the house differently. To her, it was a prize to be handed off, not a shared burden. About 6 months ago, I started noticing a shift. She'd bring up my brother more often, dropping hints about how the house would be perfect for him once he got his life together. My brother, 28 and still bouncing between odd jobs, had no savings, no plan, just a knack for charming our mother into believing he was destined for something big. She'd sit with him at the kitchen table, sketching out ideas for his next venture, a food truck, a crypto scheme, whatever sounded trendy. I'd walk in fresh from a 10-hour day of crunching numbers, and she'd barely look up. "You're doing fine," she'd say if I mentioned the mortgage payment I'd just sent. Fine. Like it was nothing. The tension started small but grew fast. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with a friend saying my brother was the one who'd carry the family forward. Carry what I was the one keeping the lights on, the one who'd skipped vacations to cover the bills. I confronted her the next day, calmly asking why she kept pushing him as the heir to a house I co-owned. She brushed it off, saying, "He's got big plans, Sarah. You don't need to worry about it." Her tone was dismissive, like I was a kid whining about a toy. I let it go, but the words stuck, burrowing deep. My sister saw it too. She was only 17, still in high school, but she picked up on every slight. One night, after my mother spent an hour hyping my brother's latest idea, a real estate course he'd never finish, my sister cornered me in my room. "Why does she act like he's the only one who matters?" she asked, her voice sharp with frustration. I didn't have an answer, just a tired shrug, but her question lit a spark. I started paying closer attention, noticing how my mother would redirect every conversation about the house to my brother. She'd talk about his future in it like my half of the deed didn't exist. I checked the legal papers from my grandfather's will just to be sure. They were clear. My name was on the title, equal to hers. Yet she was already rewriting the story in her head. The breaking point came a few weeks before that dinner. My mother called a family meeting, just her, me, and my brother. My sister wasn't invited, which should have been my first red flag. We sat in the living room, and she laid it out. She wanted to transfer my share of the house to my brother. It makes sense. She said, her voice firm, like she'd rehearsed it. He's older. He'll settle down here eventually. I stared at her stunned. Settle down. He hadn't paid a bill in his life. I pointed out that I'd been covering the mortgage, the taxes, everything. She waved it off. You're young, Sarah. You'll buy your own place someday. My brother just sat there nodding, not even pretending to argue. I didn't yell, I just said I'd think about it. But inside, I was done. That conversation changed everything. I started looking at my life differently, tallying up what I'd given and what I'd gotten back. Years of late nights, client calls, and stress, all to prop up a family that saw me as a means to an end. My sister was the only one who got it. She'd text me after those meetings saying, "You don't owe them anything." She was right, but I hadn't fully accepted it yet. Not until that dinner when my mother's words pushed me over the edge. I pulled up the latest bank statement on my laptop, my eyes scanning the numbers, but my mind was elsewhere. That evening, we were all seated around the dining table for a family dinner, me, my mother, my brother, and my sister. It was supposed to be a casual night, just chicken and mashed potatoes, nothing special. But the air felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for something to break. My mother was unusually quiet, picking at her food, glancing at my brother every few seconds. He sat slouched, scrolling through his phone, barely touching his plate. My sister across from me kept her head down like she sensed trouble coming. Then, out of nowhere, my mother set her glass down with a sharp clink and looked straight at me. "Sarah, this house," she said, her voice steady, almost rehearsed, "it doesn't belong to you anymore. It's your brother's now." The words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. My brother looked up from his phone, his lips curling into a smirk, his eyes gleaming with that smug confidence I'd seen too many times. My sister's fork froze halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide, darting between me and my mother. The silence was deafening, every second stretching out as they waited for me to react. They expected me to argue, to plead, to lose it. But I didn't. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like a switch had flipped. I smiled, not a warm smile, but a cold, deliberate one. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked out of the room without a word. My mother called after me. "Sarah, don't be dramatic," but I kept going. Upstairs, I found my sister waiting outside my room, her face pale. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I could see the fear in her eyes, not just for me, but for herself, for what this meant for us both. I put a hand on her shoulder, keeping my voice low. "I'm fine," I said. "Don't worry about me. You just focus on school, okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were still searching mine, like she knew I was planning something big. I couldn't tell her yet, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed to figure it out first. "Go to bed," I told her gently. "We'll talk tomorrow." She hesitated, then hugged me quickly before slipping back to her room. Alone in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. My mother's words weren't just a betrayal, they were a declaration of war. She thought she could erase my stake in the house, the one I'd paid for, the one my grandfather had entrusted to me. My brother's smirk told me he was in on it, probably egging her on. I wasn't going to let them rewrite my life like that. I'd spent years keeping this family afloat, pouring my money, my time, my energy into a house that was legally half mine, and now they wanted to hand it to someone who'd never lifted a finger. No, I was done playing the dutiful daughter. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the contact for my grandfather's lawyer. I'd called him a few weeks ago after my mother's first push to transfer the house, just to confirm my rights. He'd been clear my name was on the deed, and no one could take that away without my consent. I typed a quick email asking for an urgent meeting to discuss my options. I wasn't sure exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew it started with pulling my financial support. The mortgage, the taxes, the endless repairs, I'd been carrying it all. If they wanted the house to be my brother's, they could figure out how to pay for it themselves. I started making a mental checklist. First, I'd stop the automatic payments from my account. The mortgage was due in 2 weeks. and without my contribution, they'd feel the weight of their decision fast. Second, I'd need a place to stay. My friend Rachel had offered her spare room before, and I knew she'd take me in no questions asked. I shot her a text keeping it vague. "Can I crash at your place for a bit?" Her reply came within minutes. "Anytime? You good?" I didn't answer. Not yet. The next step was harder. I'd have to walk away from this house, from the life I'd built here, from the illusion of family. It wasn't just about money. It was about cutting ties with people who saw me as a tool, not a person. I looked around my room at the books I'd collected, the desk where I'd worked late nights to keep us afloat. I wouldn't take much, just what I needed to start over. My sister's face flashed in my mind, her worried eyes, her quiet support. I'd make sure she was okay no matter what. But my mother and brother, they'd made their choice. I stood up, grabbed a duffel bag, and started packing. I packed light, just a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, and a few essentials. By the next morning, I was ready to move. I'd spent the night finalizing my plan, and it felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. First, I called my grandfather's lawyer, a no-nonsense guy who'd handled the estate years ago. I told him I wanted to transfer my share of the house to my mother, effective immediately. He was surprised, asking if I was sure, since it was half mine by right. I explained I didn't want to fight over it anymore. I just wanted out. He agreed to draw up the papers, warning it'd take a few days to process. That was fine. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it to cut the cord. Next, I logged into the bank account I'd set up for family expenses, bills, groceries, repairs, all the things I'd been covering for years. I transferred every cent I'd contributed to my personal account, leaving just my mother's small deposits. It wasn't theft. It was mine, earned through the late nights and client calls. The account had been joint, but I'd been the one keeping it funded. Without my money, they'd have to figure out how to cover the mortgage, taxes, everything. I canceled the automatic payments for the house, effective the next cycle. The bank confirmed it with a curt email. Payments stopped as requested. I felt a strange mix of relief and finality. I texted my sister before I left, keeping it short. "I'm moving out today. I'll call you soon. Stay strong." I didn't want her to worry, but I couldn't stay to explain. I grabbed my bag, took one last look at the house I'd poured so much into, and drove to my friend's apartment across town. She'd been my rock through college, always ready with a couch and a coffee. When I arrived, she opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. "You don't have to tell me now," she said, her voice warm. "Just settle in." Her spare room was small but clean, with a bed and a desk, enough to start over. I unpacked my laptop first, already planning my next steps. By noon, my phone started buzzing. My mother's name flashed on the screen, call after call, but I let them go to voicemail. The first message was sharp. "Sarah, what's going on? The bank just called about the mortgage." The second was frantic. "You can't just stop paying. We need to talk." My brother sent a text, his tone dripping with entitlement. "Fix this now. You're screwing us over." I didn't respond. They were starting to feel the ground shift, realizing the house they thought was theirs came with a price they couldn't pay. My sister texted too, her message softer. "I miss you already." "Are you okay?" I replied with a quick, "I'm fine, promise." But I didn't elaborate. She didn't need to be caught in the middle yet. I met with the lawyer that afternoon at his downtown office. He walked me through the transfer process, explaining that once I signed over my share, I'd have no legal claim to the house. I nodded, signing the papers without hesitation. It wasn't about losing, it was about freedom. I asked him to notify my mother officially through a formal letter so there'd be no confusion. He raised an eyebrow but agreed, saying it'd be mailed by the end of the week. I also asked about protecting my personal accounts just in case. He suggested freezing joint access, which I did right after the meeting. I wasn't taking any chances. Back at my friend's place, I checked my email. The bank had sent a confirmation the joint account was now locked to my mother's contributions only. She'd have to cover the next mortgage payment due in 10 days on her own. I knew she couldn't. Her retail job barely paid for her car, let alone a house in the suburbs. My brother was even less help with no steady income and a habit of blowing cash on pointless schemes. They'd assumed I'd always be there propping them up. Now they were scrambling. My phone kept buzzing into the evening. My mother left another voicemail, her voice cracking. "Sarah, this is serious. You can't do this to us." My brother sent more texts, each one angrier. "You're so selfish. You'll regret this." I muted their numbers not out of spite, but because I needed space to think. My sister's next message hit harder. Mom's freaking out. "She didn't know you paid so much." I stared at that one for a long time. My mother hadn't even realized how much I'd been carrying. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. I lay on the spare bed that night staring at the ceiling, my friend's apartment quiet around me. I settled into my friend's apartment, my new routine taking shape. A week after I moved out, the fallout began. My phone, still on silent for my mother and brother, lit up with notifications. My mother's voicemails had shifted from frantic to desperate. "Sarah, please call me back," she said in one, her voice trembling. "The bank sent a notice about the mortgage. We can't lose this house." I listened, then deleted it. She wasn't apologizing, she was begging for me to fix her mess. My brother's messages were worse, a mix of demands and accusations. "You think you can just walk away and ruin us one read?" I didn't reply. I'd made my choice, and I wasn't going back. My sister was the only one I kept in touch with. She texted me late one night, her words careful. "Mom's losing it." The bank called again today. I could feel her worry through the screen, caught between loyalty to our mother and understanding why I'd left. I called her, keeping my voice steady. "You don't have to fix this," I told her. "Focus on your grades, your future. I've got your back." She hesitated, then whispered, "I know you do. I just hate seeing them like this." I didn't push her. She was still a kid, stuck in a house that was falling apart without my money. The crisis hit them hard and fast. My mother's retail job couldn't cover the mortgage, not even close. The house, now fully in her name after I'd signed over my share, was her responsibility. The lawyer's letter had arrived spelling it out. I was no longer liable for any payments. Without my contributions, they were staring down a $5,000 monthly mortgage they couldn't afford. My brother, predictably, was no help. He'd been living off odd jobs and my mother's handout, spending what little he earned on flashy gadgets or get-rich-quick schemes. They were drowning, and they knew it. Then they crossed a line. I got an alert from my bank one morning. Someone had tried to access my personal account. 3 failed login attempts, all from an unfamiliar device. I called the bank immediately, confirming it wasn't me. They locked the account for security, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. I remembered my brother bragging about knowing computers during one of his half-baked startup ideas. It didn't take a genius to figure out he was behind it, probably with my mother's blessing. I changed all my passwords, added 2-factor authentication, and notified the bank to flag any suspicious activity. I wasn't just protecting my money, I was drawing a line they couldn't cross. My friend noticed my tension when I got off the phone. "Everything okay?" she asked, pouring me a coffee. I nodded, not ready to dive into the details. "Just family nonsense," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't press, but her quiet support kept me grounded. I spent that afternoon double-checking my finances, making sure every account was secure. I'd worked too hard to let them take anything else from me. My sister filled in the gaps later that week. She called, her voice low, like she was hiding from someone. "Mom and Brian are fighting all the time," she said. "She keeps saying you owe her for raising you, that you can't just abandon the family." I clenched my jaw, biting back the urge to call my mother and set her straight. Instead, I asked, "What's Brian doing?" My sister sighed. "He's been on his laptop all day muttering about fixing this. I think he's trying to get into your accounts." I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. They weren't just desperate, they were willing to break the law to drag me back into their mess. I contacted my lawyer again, updating him on the login attempts. He advised filing a report with the bank and keeping records of everything: texts, voicemails, emails. If they escalate, he said you might need a restraining order. The thought of going that far felt heavy, but I agreed to document it all. I forwarded him my brother's threatening messages and my mother's voicemails, each one more pleading than the last. "Sarah, we're family," she said in one. "You can't let us lose everything. Family." The word felt hollow now. My sister's next call was quieter. "I told Mom you're not coming back," she said. She cried, but I think she's starting to get it. I could hear the strain in her voice, the weight of being caught in the middle. "You did the right thing," I told her. "I'm here for you always." She didn't reply right away, but I knew she was relieved to hear it. I hated that she was stuck in that house watching my mother and brother spiral, but I couldn't pull her out yet, not until she was 18, and could leave on her own. The bank sent another notice a few days later addressed to my mother but forwarded to me by mistake. It was a late payment warning, the first step toward foreclosure. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet resolve. They'd made their choices and now they faced the consequences. My brother's attempts to access my account stopped after the bank tightened security, but I knew he wasn't done. He'd always been stubborn, thinking he could outsmart any problem. My mother, too, was clinging to the idea that I'd cave, that guilt would pull me back. They were wrong. I sent a quick email to my sister promising we'd talk soon and closed my laptop. 2 weeks after I moved out, my mother and brother's desperation reached new lows. My phone buzzed with another voicemail from my mother, her voice softer now, almost pitiful. "Sarah, we can work this out," she pleaded. "Come home, we'll talk. You're still part of this family." I didn't call back. Her words sounded like regret, but I knew better. It was about the mortgage, not me. My brother's texts were less subtle, a barrage of guilt trips and threats. "You're tearing us apart. Everyone knows you abandoned us." I muted their numbers again, tired of the same script. Then they took it public. I got a call from an old high school friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her tone cautious. "Your mom posted something online about you." I froze, my stomach twisting. I opened my social media, which I rarely checked, and there it was, a long post on my mother's profile painting me as the villain. She claimed I'd stolen money from the family, left them homeless, and turned my back on my roots. The comments were brutal, mostly from her friends who didn't know the whole story. What kind of daughter does that one read? My brother had shared it, adding his own spin. "My sister thinks she's better than us. She'll regret this." I scrolled through, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from anger. They weren't just begging, they were trying to ruin me. My sister texted me that night, distraught. "Mom's telling everyone you took everything," she wrote. I tried to stop her, but she won't listen. I called her right away, keeping my voice calm to ease her nerves. "Don't get involved," I said. "This is between me and them. You're not responsible for their choices." She sighed, her voice heavy. "I know, but it's getting worse. Brian's been emailing people saying you're a bad accountant." That hit hard. My freelance business relied on trust, and he was targeting my livelihood. I thanked her for the heads up and promised to handle it. I contacted my lawyer the next morning, forwarding screenshots of the posts and my brother's messages. He was blunt. "This is defamation. You have grounds to sue." I hadn't wanted to go that far, but their actions left me no choice. I asked him to draft a cease and desist letter demanding they remove the posts and stop spreading lies. He suggested gathering evidence from my clients to counter any damage to my reputation. I reached out to a few trusted ones, explaining the situation vaguely: family drama, false rumors. To my relief, they were supportive, offering testimonials about my work. One client, a small bakery owner, even sent a glowing email: "Sarah's the best accountant I've ever had." Don't believe the nonsense. But the attacks didn't stop. A week later, I got an email from a potential client canceling a consultation. I heard some concerning things about your reliability, they wrote. I traced it back to an anonymous review on a business site. Clearly, my brother's work, same phrasing as his texts, same spiteful tone. He'd accused me of mismanaging funds and being unprofessional. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who added it to the file. We're building a strong case, he said. Keep documenting everything. I did, saving every post, comment, and message, each one a reminder of how far they'd go. My friend noticed my stress one evening as we ate takeout in her apartment. You're handling this better than I would, she said, her voice gentle. I'd be screaming. I laughed, but it was hollow. I'm too tired to scream, I admitted. She squeezed my hand, offering the kind of quiet support I needed. I was grateful for her for the space to rebuild without judgment. My sister called again a few days later, her voice shaky. Mom's talking about selling furniture to pay the mortgage, she said. She keeps saying you'll come back if she begs enough. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. She's wrong, I said firmly. I'm not coming back. But you're getting out of there soon. I'll help you. She didn't reply right away, but I could hear her relief. She was caught in their chaos, but she trusted me to be her anchor. The online attacks slowed after the cease and desist letter arrived. My mother posted a vague follow-up claiming it was a misunderstanding but didn't retract her lies. My brother, stubborn as ever, kept sharing subtle jabs hinting at my betrayal without naming me. I knew they were hoping to shame me into returning, to guilt me into footing their bills again. But I was done being their safety net. My lawyer was already preparing for the next step, a lawsuit, if they didn't stop. I didn't want to drag it out, but I'd protect what I'd built, no matter the cost. I finished replying to a client email and closed my laptop, feeling a sense of calm. 3 months after moving out, I was ready to close this chapter for good. My mother and brother's attempts to drag me back had failed, and their actions, first begging, then attacking my reputation, had only solidified my resolve. I blocked their numbers and social media accounts, cutting off the last threads of contact. No more voicemails, no more texts, no more chances for them to guilt me. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. My focus shifted to building my life and keeping my promise to my sister. My sister turned 18 a week later, a milestone that felt like a turning point for both of us. I drove to a coffee shop near her school to meet her away from the house where tension still lingered. She looked tired, her eyes carrying the weight of living with our mother and brother. They're moving out soon, she told me, stirring her coffee. The bank took the house. Mom's been packing boxes. I nodded, not surprised. The foreclosure notice had come after months of missed payments, a consequence of their refusal to face reality without my support. I didn't ask for details, it wasn't my burden anymore. Instead, I slid an envelope across the table. This is for you, I said. Inside was a check enough to cover her first semester's tuition and a deposit for a dorm room. Her eyes widened and she shook her head. I can't take this, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. You can, and you will. Get out of that house, focus on college. You deserve it. She hugged me tightly, her voice cracking with gratitude. My lawyer called the next day with an update on the defamation case. The cease and desist letter had forced my mother to take down her posts, but my brother's anonymous reviews had cost me a few clients. We'd filed a lawsuit, and the evidence, screenshots, messages, client testimonials, was airtight. The court ruled in my favor, ordering my brother to pay a small fine and issue a public retraction. He didn't have the money, of course, but the ruling cleared my name. My clients stood by me, and new ones came through referrals drawn to my work ethic and the story of how I'd stood my ground. My business was stronger than ever, a testament to years of discipline and late nights. My mother and brother, meanwhile, were unraveling. My sister told me they'd moved into a cramped apartment across town, a far cry from the suburban house I'd once kept afloat. My mother had taken a second job working nights at a diner while my brother bounced between temp gigs, still chasing shortcuts that never panned out. They'd stopped mentioning me online, the lawsuit's warning lingering like a shadow. I didn't feel vindicated, just relieved to be free of their chaos. My sister, now settled in her dorm, sent me photos of her new life textbooks, campus events, a smile I hadn't seen in years. I wired her money each month, small amounts to cover books or meals, making sure she could focus on her studies without worrying about our mother's mess. One evening, I sat with my friend at her apartment sharing a bottle of wine. "You did what most people can't," she said, raising her glass. "You walked away and built something better." I smiled, but my thoughts drifted to the years I'd spent carrying my family, believing it was my duty. I'd learned the hard way that family isn't about obligation, it's about respect. And they'd shown me none. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was the only way to reclaim my worth. I'd spent too long letting their needs define me, pouring my money and energy into a house they claimed as theirs. Now I was living for myself, and it felt right. I thought about my sister starting fresh, and the clients who trusted me, the life I was building brick by brick. Self-respect wasn't just about standing up to them, it was about choosing myself even when it hurt. I'd lost a house, a family, but I'd gained something more, the strength to walk away and never look back. My mother and brother's downfall wasn't my victory, it was just the consequence of their choices. I didn't need to see them fail to know I'd succeeded. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and headed out to meet a new client.